Listen, I've never been more aware of my blackness until coming to America.
People who don't live in America legitimately do not understand how much race plays a part in like every aspect of your life. I was in an Uber one time and the Uber driver, who was a black man, asked me if I was mixed. And I said, yes, my dad's from Italy and my mom's American. And he looks at me in the rearview mirror and he goes, you know you black, right? And I was like, well, you asked if I was mixed. So I said, I'm Italian American. And he pauses for a couple of seconds and he looks in the mirror again and he goes, you black. Okay, like so what were you expecting when you asked me that question? Like, did you just want me to say like, yeah, I'm light skinned? I don't like what? And I was just reminded of the fact that when I moved to America, I had to stop thinking of myself as like métis, because in Senegal, we call mixed people métis, and that's just as valid of a race as either being black or white. And his comment to me just felt kind of like, okay, you may think you're mixed, but just remember, in this country, you are a black woman who is oppressed, and the white men will see you as a black woman, and you will be treated as a black woman. And I was like, I live my own experience. Like, I'm very much aware of how I interact with people in America. Like, it just felt like such a random ass, I don't fucking know. But anyways, it makes sense why a lot of foreigners are like, why are Americans so obsessed with race? We are.
White Europeans are some of the most infuriating people on the planet because they'll say stuff like this. Can Americans stop using white people? Like, what does that even really mean anymore? Or Americans are so obsessed with race. Like, we don't have that over here. Which is so crazy to me when you consider the fact that they literally invented the very concept of race and racism, then went and colonized the entirety of the world, imposed those concepts onto everybody, and we all still live by those same standards today. But then they want to sit back and relax and look at everybody else talk about some racism. Like, y'all need to fix that. As if y'all didn't create it. As if y'all didn't make it up. 17th, 18th century Europe was when the concept of race was born. Okay, the hierarchies associated with race born, and then y'all disperse that shit the way that y'all do colonialism. Okay, and I need to put together a Google Doc so y'all can see the sheer amount of angry comments that I get from white Europeans on a daily basis, talking about some, oh my god, Americans are so obsessed with race. Like, why do you make everything about race? And you know what my favorite ones are? It's when people from the UK will be like, racism doesn't exist over here. You Americans are just obsessed. Y'all are the ones creating the divide. Or the people from France. Oh, the French, baby, French. Talking about stuff. We don't acknowledge race over here. In France, are y'all living in a different plane of reality? Here's my impression of a French person being asked about racism. Moi, je suis pas raciste, mais peut-être envoyer les immigrants chez eux, ça me ferait pas de mauvaise idée, quoi. Mind you, we have to acknowledge that race operates differently depending on where you are in the world. And I'm putting this in this video at this point in time because I know that there's people who only watch the first 20 seconds and are already angrily commenting. So anybody who actually took the time to watch this video, go ahead and just drop the timestamp in response to those comments so that they can realize how silly they sound and how important it is to actually watch a full video. We acknowledge that the way that race operates in the United States is not going to be the same way that it operates in South Africa, in France, in Spain. Like, it's going to be different depending on where you are in the world. However, to say that racism does not exist in your part of the world, to be a British person, to look over at the United States, talk about something, y'all are so obsessed with race over there. We don't have that over here. That is insane. And that is what I'm talking about. To deny the existence of systemic oppression toward people of color, to deny that in your part of the world requires a certain level of ignorance, because there ain't no way. I wish y'all could see my comments. Like, I need to compile these comments so y'all could just see. The United States of America has really become the world's scapegoat for racism. Just, it's crazy. Not even Canada. I'm from Canada. People will see somebody who like doesn't have an accent and lives in like the western part of the world, and they'll just assume that every single one of those people comes from the US. You forget that Canada is out here with our racist as hell history too. It's all the same shit, different font. Not even, it's the same font pretty much. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about the comment y'all like to make about the American education system. Because y'all like to say Americans are so stupid, their education system is trash, and they're not taught an accurate version of history. But if you're gonna point the figure, then you gotta point it right back at yourself, because do you think that you were taught an accurate version of your history? Really? And I know that I'm generalizing white Europeans in this video and they're gonna be real mad about that, but I don't give a fuck. I'm talking mostly about the Brits and the French, but if the shoe fits, then I'll fucking wear it, okay? An obvious example of this is when I posted a video about Trinidad, my family's history, and because the British colonized Trinidad, my grandparents had British nuns as teachers, and they were only exclusively taught British culture and British history. They were never taught anything about Trinidad. Obviously, that's intentional. My grandma would always tell me, I knew everything about daffodils dancing in the breeze, but I didn't know the first thing about sugarcane. Do y'all understand the amount of stitches I received from the Brits? 2, 3, 4-minute videos, okay? Bringing up dates and timelines, talking about how they never colonized Trinidad. They came in and they offered help and support. They gave us structure because we were a bunch of savages who didn't know up from down, and they came in and they helped us out. They helped us become civilized. That is what y'all learned in school. Do you really think that the British education system is out here educating y'all about the ins and outs of the mass atrocities that they committed around the entire world and are still committing today? Do you think that you'd be able to proudly sing your national anthem every day in school if you actually knew what your country is responsible for? You're not taught that for a reason. It's the same thing here in Canada. I hate when Canadians sit on their little high horse looking over at the States talking about, oh my god, they're so stupid over there in the US. Oh my god, it's so crazy over there. Canadians do the same shit as the Europeans. It's ridiculous. Do you think that we learned an accurate version of history? The only thing that I remember learning about indigenous peoples in Canada is us having a little section every year about les autochtones. We learned that they lived in igloos barbecues and they lived in teepees, and then we made teepees out of popsicle sticks, and that's pretty much it. Like, well into high school, I'm not even kidding. So if you're gonna point the finger, then you gotta point it right back at yourself. I'm tired. I am tired of it. It's Black History Month. Can I have a break? Can I have a break? we don't get no break. We don't get no break.
People around the world, I would say, especially people in Europe, love to say Americans are obsessed with race. I'm gonna generalize that. I know people hate that. And then Americans from the US are obviously like, yes, why wouldn't you be obsessed with race? Because it affects so many things historically, culturally, language-wise, you know, like, especially if you look at the context of how we're talking about race. And I think I understand why, because I made a video about that, about being Asian living in Spain. And someone was like, everyone is Spanish. And they're like, I went to America once and everyone was obsessed with race. I just realized that not every country does a census based on race. So this map is showing countries where the ethnicity or race of people was counted in at least one census since 1991. And obviously the US, a lot of South America, Australia, New Zealand, but a lot of Western European countries are not listed. Spain, Portugal, France. And so I guess it makes sense. In these countries, they would be like, why are you always talking about race when, like, nationality-wise, everyone is Spanish? Even though, like, outwards appearing, people would assume that an Asian person is Asian before they're Spanish. But in the US, growing up since we were kids, like, putting on, like, every standardized testing, everything, you would have to put your race or, like, your ethnicity on there and your race. And obviously there are reasons for that. So there's, like, more representation. Indigenous people get, like, different access to things based on how they were treated in the past. But I just realized this, and I feel like this is so fascinating.
You know, the more that I travel to other countries, the more that I realize how much we focus on race here in the United States, how much we segregate and separate each other instead of embracing our differences in cultures like they do in other countries. Now, I'm not saying that we are the worst, but I am saying that we could learn a thing or two from other countries. For example, Brazil, they call it mistura, right? Which is the mixture of a lot of different races, white, indigenous, and black. And honestly, the outcome is absolutely breathtaking. And it's so beautiful to see a country embrace so many different sides of different cultures and blend it together. I just think that that is absolutely beautiful. And I hope that one day the US could be a little bit more like that, instead of focusing so much on, you know, the color of our skin or the way that we talk, or just stupid things like that. But what do you guys think?
Only in America can a job applicator ask for your risk other than your qualification. Only in America can your skin color determine how safe you feel in your own neighborhood. And only in America is race not just a conversation, it is an obsession. Why is that? Today we are diving deep, not just into America's racial history, but why it continues to shape everything from politics to pop culture. Let's talk about it. So welcome back to Global Gist with Beejay channel, where we keep it real and unapologetically black. If you've ever wondered why race is always part of the conversation in America, you're not alone. From an outsider looking in, it's one of the most racialized societies in the world. So what's fueling the obsession? What is it? First, let's be honest. America was built on racial division, from slavery to segregation to systematic racism. Today, race wasn't just part of the story, it was the foundation. The idea of who is white, who is black, who gets the right, who gets punished, all of it has always revolved around race. So when people say, let's move past it, the question is how? When it's never resolved, you don't move past 400 years of oppression like it's just a very messy breakup. No way. So let's watch these videos, right? For you to know that what I'm saying is not a lie, right? And then I'll be back with the final. Do not forget to subscribe, right? Do not forget to like, share. This is a channel for black people. Do not forget to always subscribe. Share to your friends. Tell them to come subscribe. Let's enjoy ourselves here, right? Let's continue.
Black people are obsessed with race. Okay, let's talk about it. This country was founded on a racialized concept, which was that Europeans were preordained by God to rule the world, and that Africans ripped from their homes and transported across the transatlantic shores were destined to be their unpaid labor. That is the most important and defining feature of America at its inception, was a racial hierarchy whereby white men were at the top and Africans were at the bottom. Chattel slavery then lasted for nearly 250 years, ending in 1865. And during those 2.5 centuries, Black Americans were tortured. They were mentally and physically and sexually abused. They were murdered. They were forced to toil on land without being paid. They built these immense economies for America. They made America rich, but they didn't get any payment
The white people did. Once slavery ended, then we had the Black Codes, which were a series of discriminatory laws made precisely to perpetuate all of the systems and factors at play during enslavement. Black Codes severely limited the social, economic, political mobility of Black Americans, right? Black Americans really weren't able to own property. They weren't allowed to vote, really. They weren't able to testify against white people. They weren't able to serve on juries. They didn't really have any civil rights. And then there's the 13th Amendment, right? It abolished slavery, except for when someone was a criminal. And wouldn't you know, Black people were then criminalized for everything, thus enabling white people to re-enslave them. Next up, the Jim Crow laws, which restricted the mobility of Black Americans in public life in nearly every manner possible. And it lasted until the Civil Rights Movement. And wouldn't you know, Black people weren't actually enfranchised to vote until 1965. But it's not about race. And next up, we have redlining, whereby financial institutions like banks refuse to provide financial services like mortgages to Black people. Then we have mass incarceration, which is essentially a reimagination of slavery. I know you know that Black Americans are disproportionately incarcerated by both the state and the federal government, that they are overrepresented at every stage of the criminal legal system. Black people are treated like absolute shit in the criminal legal system. First of all, there are nearly 2 million people incarcerated in the United States, which is horrific and abysmal. 37% of those people are Black Americans, even though Black people only represent 13% of the American population. Black people across the board get worse plea deals, they get harsher sentencings, they get much higher bail, and they face disproportionate prejudice and discrimination from judges, from the prosecutors, and from the juries. But it's not about race. Then all of these tentacles of racism and discrimination and prejudice then reach into every other part of American life and infect it, right? Like, for example, have you seen our political system? Enough said there. Black people have less access to college and have less avenues to get there. The wealth gap between the median Black household and the median white household is $240,000, which means for every $100 of wealth that a white household has, a Black household only has $15. Black people face disproportionately negative outcomes in healthcare, and the maternal death rates for Black women are insane and abysmal. Black people are promoted much less readily by their employers, and only 1.6% of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies are Black people. Black people are disproportionately surveilled, arrested, and killed by the police. But it's not about race. So the next time you come in my comments and ask me why I talk about race so much, or you go somewhere else, not everything's about race. I'd encourage you to watch this video like 5 times and then send it to your racist family members and then get back to me. Thank you.
Every time I hear a non-American say, oh, you Americans are obsessed with race, I'm just like, America was built on racism and has thrived and profited off of racism, and we still have a plethora of racial issues today. So it's just like, why wouldn't we be obsessed with race, you know?
I get so annoyed with people from other countries acting like they don't understand why Black Americans or Americans in general are always talking about race. When just 50 years ago, your race determined what restaurants you could or couldn't eat at, what neighborhoods you could or couldn't live in. You know, would you say that to somebody who lived in like apartheid South Africa? No. So if you make race the determining factor of someone's livelihood in your society, of course there are going to be like cultural implications of that. Like the culture is going to be based on the society that that culture exists within. And if race is a big part of that, then that's going to be a part of the culture as well. Culturally, Black people are not separated from the idea of race because our entire culture has evolved through oppression based on race. Like, we're not able to separate ourselves from our race in this country because it was the deciding factor of what we could and couldn't do in this country. And I don't understand how people learn about segregation, Jim Crow, slavery, and act like those things wouldn't have actual implications on culture. Like, how do y'all think this human evolution shit works?
I always find it interesting when non-Black people always tell Black people why we always bring race into it. But the USA is always about race. America is always about race. And it's always white people telling Black people not to bring race into things when white people literally created a system based on race. So, buddy, I bring race into it because it is definitely about race. It is most definitely about race because primarily the way America is built and the way America is set up, it makes the military a very attractive option for for economically disadvantaged people, typically Black Americans and Latino people, mainly Black Americans anyway. That's why you have a large proportion of Black Americans in the military, because it's one of the escape routes out of poverty. Oh yes, oh yes. So don't try and trivialize. And this is something I will not allow you to do. You will not trivialize that race in the context of America is above everything else, because America was built on racism. Everything in America is about race. So don't tell me, oh, and one more thing. There were, was it the Tuskegee Airmen of the American military? When they came back from fighting in World War, they were still spat at and things were thrown at them by white Americans, despite the fact that those Black military people went to fight on behalf of America. So it's always about race. Don't you dare do that on my page, talking about why bring race into it. It's about race. When it's America, it's always about race. It always has been about race. It will always be about race. And yes, the Black Americans that are out here jumping up and down to go fight Iran on behalf of America, they're stupid. I said what I said, because you know damn well you will vote against their interests when the opportunity comes up. So don't talk about unity. Unity overall in America, that's a lie. Because if America was all about unity, you would have free healthcare. But you don't have free healthcare because you don't want other groups to benefit from it. Do you know how many public pools in America has been shut down because Black Americans were now given access to those things? You know how many public parks have been closed because it was not exclusive for white people anymore in America? Bro, I know American history, huh? You're not talking to some random content creator. I actually know what I'm talking about. Let me show you a book so that just to give you an insight that I know what I'm talking about. See this book? Black Fortunes. It talks about America in a very summarized way, but it talks about America and how it's always about race. White men at the top, followed by white women and everybody else. So it's about race. Don't talk to me about it. It's not about race. It's a lie. It's about.
I want to talk about race really quick, specifically to the people that love to say, oh, you make everything about race. Or anytime you bring up the topic of race or anything related to it, they say, oh, you love to bring about race. You're race obsessed. The easiest way to debunk that point or to negate that point is in a country with the history of America, of course, there's going to be a high frequency of the race conversation. You get what I'm saying? Germany, for example, if a common topic that was brought up was Jews or Judaism, it would be inappropriate to be like, oh, you're Jew obsessed. You're always bringing up that, given the history of fucking Germany. I don't know, maybe if we were in Brazil, it would be a bit odd. But to ignore the history is crazy. But to go a little bit deeper than that, why, instead of asking why people are race obsessed, why are you people obsessed with acting as if it doesn't matter? It's on job applications. When I'm filling out a job application, it wants to know what race I am, what my ethnicity is. So why are we acting like it doesn't matter? I remember dating white women when I was growing up, and looks I would get in Mississippi. Or when a white woman dates a black guy, is, oh, she likes some dark. It's like a thing, like they have to talk about it. Or when a white guy dates a black girl, it's, oh, she's giving him a little bit of flavor. It's like a thing, they have to talk about it. Why are y'all obsessed with acting as if it's just something to shrug off? Where is the benefit when you act like race doesn't matter? Even from like a basic level, there are physical differences most of the time when comparing two races other than just pigmentation. Things that are specific or more distinguished in this race than they may be in another race or vice versa. It matters. So to act or to be annoyed every time you hear the race conversation in America of all places is fucking crazy. If race didn't matter, why is Charlie Kirk at that site where they were removing the BLM sign on the pavement cheering and applauding? A person that thinks race doesn't matter wouldn't attend that and wouldn't broadcast that. They would just be like, oh, race doesn't matter, and they would go on about their day. Y'all unconsciously make it just as big of a deal as we do consciously. Do you have any idea how frustrating that is when we're debating y'all? How can you say race doesn't matter when the shooting that happened in Buffalo, for example, that mass shooting at the grocery store, clearly racially motivated? So if somebody can lean on something like race enough to where they'll go out and commit a mass shooting and shoot people at a grocery store just because of their race, if the human mind is capable of that, why do you sit here and yell, race doesn't matter, you're race obsessed? So was he. If your argument is that we always bring up race and we're so race obsessed, do you ask that same question to the KKK? Well, y'all are so obsessed with race that you formed an entire group. You have a uniform. Y'all organize marches and rallies, and you have meetings. And you have a grand wizard. You've established a hierarchy for something based on race. It obviously matters to them. Do you attack them the same way you attack us for being race obsessed? No. Why is that? One side of the coin is you can't go up against somebody that's wildly more qualified than you to perform the job that y'all are both applying for and then feel away when they get selected and then try to say, oh, well, I should have been given that position even though I'm not qualified because I'm this race or I'm this gender and this is going to level the playing fields and that's why I should get this position because historically I've been treated unfairly. You're not qualified. You get what I'm saying? I know that's a longer conversation, but the other side of that coin is other people will look at a diverse office, a diverse staff at a company that's doing well, and they didn't get to be a part of that company, and they go, oh, that's just DEI. That's why I didn't get that position, because they had to meet a quota. That's just DEI. No, you too were not qualified. And I think that's the meat of it. You want to call other people race obsessed, but then when you don't get into this position that you feel you should have gotten into, but somebody of a different race does, instead of taking it to the chin and being like, damn, I need to work a little bit harder, try it again. The same way a father or a mother would tell their son or their daughter that if you fail, don't give up, try again. No, you don't do that. You go, oh, DEI, disrupt it all. This can't be true. But we're the race obsessed ones. Okay, got it.
So I'm noticing a lot of racist comments on my comment section, a lot of which are from people who identify as black. So I just want to shed light on this race war between the Asian American community and the Black American community. Yes, there is racism on both sides. But what do we have in common, other than being both discriminated minorities? We are both American, and America was founded on multiculturalism and diversity. That's why multiculturalism works so well in America, and really only in America, whereas in other countries like Europe and Asia, multiculturalism doesn't work so well, because those places weren't founded on the value of multiculturalism. They were ethnostates. America is not an ethnostate. And a lot of white leftists think it's the white majority oppressors versus the minority oppressed. But clearly there's a race war within the minority oppressed. And it's tearing apart the very foundation of what America was built on. We are one human race after all.
Americans are obsessed with race. As an outsider looking in, I live in Mexico and I'm from Mexico.
And this is exactly why y'all need to start looking at mestizos and white mestizos as the white people that they are. They are the white people of Latin America. They are the dominant group of Latin America. This is the dominant classes trying to speak over and for the racialized classes of Latin America. They are akin to Anglos in the US, white people, who will say similar. Oh, there's not a big deal with race here. Of course not. You're not being racialized. You're part of the dominant group. Just like white people don't discover that they're white until they're in their 30s. Black people know they're black at what, age 4? And you ask that of a black person in Panama, Cuba, Colombia, it's going to be similar. You ask that of a white mestizo in Colombia, Cuba, Panama, they're going to say the same similar things as he is saying, as white Anglos do in the States. Dominant groups are not being racialized. Dominant groups should not speak for racialized people. And I've said this before again and again and again. I contend with race more in Latin America than I ever do in the US. And this is not to give the US an escape hatch or say it's less. None of that. I'm offering my experiences. Racial othering is common, normalized in Latin America, so much so that you have goof troops like the guy saying things like this. It is normalized. Latin America nationalizes its racism. It turns its racism into national symbols. I have a trillion videos and reels and other content speaking to this. This is my entire body of work. And this is the gaslighting that continues to happen because, again, people who wouldn't be racialized in their country are being the mouthpieces about race in their country. How? Why? Stop listening to them. They're lying. Their experience is not universal, and their experience is not what it would be for someone who is being racialized. Because you cannot truly think that someone that looks like him and someone that looks like me are having the same experience. Let's turn this on for once. Let's think for once. Try it. And this is also very important because this is the narrative that gets sold over and over and over when you have generations of Black and Indigenous people speaking up, pushing back, resisting, and talking about this all the time. All the time. But you never listen to us. You never do. My pinned reel on my TikTok is an Afro-Cuban saying to stop calling his Afro-Cuban music Latin because he don't even know what Latin means. All he knows is that he's Black. All he knows is that his music is coming from Africa. It's an African-derived art form. And here you are saying, no, that doesn't exist.
Welcome back. I must say, I give all the whole, accolades to those content creators, right, on TikTok that did those videos, right? That was where I got it from. But I've always had this in mind. Why is America like that, right? Why is America obsessed with race? Because it's never been about race. It's always about power, and until that power is balanced, the obsession will continue. Do you think I'm lying? Of course. Until it's balanced, it will continue. I was thinking by now they would have moved past this whole race thing, but I think it's not stopping anytime soon, to be honest. Right? The obsession will continue. What do you think? Is America truly ready for a post-racial society? Or is it just a myth? Let me see your thoughts in the comments, right? Let me see it in the comments. And do not forget to share, subscribe, like, right? And do not forget to stay bold, stay woke, and stay global. With Global Gist with BJ. I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.